On today's episode of Survival Dispatch News, we're discussing the complete and utter failure of the Biden admin to protect our southern border from the invasion of millions of illegal immigrants, the vast majority of whom are fighting-age males. Many of them are also career criminals and members of terrorist groups with nefarious intentions. The video clip that's playing was shot over the past few days at our southern border. It's one of thousands of videos recorded at our southern border over the past year that show how truly out of control the situation is. The feds have been warning that terrorist attacks on the homeland are imminent, which is no surprise considering the massive number of invaders who've gained entry to our country. Even the ones who don't have criminal intentions are putting a huge economic strain on our country that's negatively impacting Americans. This one topic shows how little the current administration cares about Americans and our security. And we're back. And today we're joined by a special guest who we will just call Jeff, 26-year CIA agent. So all y'all who've been accusing us of being CIA agents, and we've repetitively told you that we are not CIA agents, we went and got the real deal. Welcome to the show, Jeff.
Thank you. A little bit of background. I was in the CIA for 26 years. I was a case officer. We don't use the term agent. That's the FBI.
Okay.
And my job was to recruit spies and steal secrets. And my primary focus inside the agency was working on weapons of mass destruction and unconventional advanced weapons, or I should say advanced conventional weapons such as directed energy railguns, things like that. So that was my primary focus when I was inside the agency.
Okay, I appreciate that. I was fixing to ask you for a little bit of clarification, but you beat me to the punch. So today's topic on Survival Dispatch News, we're discussing what we feel is the top blunder of the Biden admin this year. And I think hands down, most people would agree that the debacle at the southern border is by far and away the biggest threat to us. But before we dive into that in depth, we want to establish some stuff right out of the gate. And of course, we've discussed this offline, but we're going to share this with our audience. I'm going to share this right now. Is a few years ago, Obama was being interviewed by Stephen Colbert, and he made some comments that are highlighted here on this webpage that he would love to have a third term where he had a puppet, essentially a front man that he could direct by earpiece. And clearly that's been happening. We've got some more articles here from left-wing news outlets. So this is not a right-wing conspiracy theory. The fact of the matter is that Obama is running the show. Here's an article. We'll include all these links down below, by the way, from NBC, about as left-wing as it gets, which this is just one of many examples of Obama publicly acknowledging that he's been guiding the current administration. Top staff picks for Biden are Obama's previous people, which just adds more credence to the reality of the situation that this really is Obama's third term. Here's another article on Obama essentially thanking Joe Biden for completing the job that he started. And this article is written from a foreign perspective as far as Great Britain is concerned, and even they feel like this is Obama's third term. So people can argue till they're blue in the face whether Obama is running the show or not. There's a mountain of evidence directly from the horse's mouth to show that that's the case. Again, before we get into the border, we're just trying to establish what the current situation is. So the next part, this is pretty bad. This is a recent dinner that Joe Biden attended, and it clearly, he's suffering from dementia. They hop him up on drugs when they need to wheel him out for a dog and pony show. But you had some comments on the dementia as well. Maybe you want to add those.
It's on a personal note. My father passed away from advanced dementia in 2020, early 2020. And what I see with Biden's demeanor, his look, his outbursts are very similar to what we saw with my father, where they'll go from being happy to having angry outbursts, but that kind of 10,000-yard stare where you can just look in their eyes and know they're not there. And we see that every time I see him on TV. I swear to God, revisiting that.
My father had dementia as well. and his brain checked out and the body followed it. And I agree with your comments. I think just as a human being, though, to see somebody who has dementia being used as a pawn like Joe Biden. I'm not a Joe Biden fan, never have been a Joe Biden fan, but he's really being taken advantage of as a pretty advanced case of dementia. So all of that being aside, let's talk about the border, Jeff. There's a video playing. All of the rest of the videos and web pages that we have to discuss are really recent, meaning the past couple of days, past 48 hours. This video here is showing convoys of Africans coming across the southern border. We know that people have come across the southern border from 160 different countries. We know that there's been all sorts of special interest aliens with known ties to terrorist organizations, criminal activity.
This survival dispatch video is brought to you by Nutrient Survival. Nourish your body, power your mind.
You're kind of in this neck of the woods, Jeff.
Southern Arizona.
Give me your thoughts. I'll just let this video play again while you're talking. Give us your thoughts on this influx of people from all over the place.
To me, it's incredibly irresponsible and incredibly dangerous because as a country, as a government, the government are our responsibility to know who we're letting in. It's just like you wouldn't have a party at your house for a kid's birthday party and allow just some stranger to climb over the wall and join the party. And I always give the example, and they say, oh, but they're going to help our economy. If someone breaks into your house and sleeps in your guest room, all because they make the bed in the morning doesn't mean they get to stay. And the thing is, we don't know who these people are. And if they're coming in and they're seeking asylum, the law on asylum is you ask for asylum in the first safe country you come to. Well, if someone's coming here from, be it Ghana or Guatemala, and they're coming in from Mexico, they should be asking for asylum in Mexico, not the United States, because this is not their first safe haven. And the fact that we're letting them in means it's purposeful, because it would be so easy to deny them. You just say, we don't recognize Ghana as a place where you have to, that's under siege, and therefore we're going to give you asylum. You have to ask for asylum in Mexico, or if you flew in here from France, you would declare you'd ask for asylum in France. So this is willful.
I was just going to say, I didn't know that, Jeff. So thank you for making that point. I did not realize that the standard protocol was for them to ask for asylum in another country before.
Well, the first safe country you come to. Now, if they're if they're a Mexican and they feel like they're being persecuted in Mexico, they can come in and apply for asylum, and that's okay because we're the first safe country.
Okay.
But if you're coming from Africa or South Asia, no, you've come through 20 other countries to get here.
The numbers are absolutely staggering. What's going on? I just read, and I believe it was on MSNBC as well, because I read across the spectrum, that by this time next year, if this goes unaddressed, approximately 15% of the people in the continental United States will be here illegally. 15%. Now you're talking upwards of 45, 50,000 people, or million, pardon me, people.
Million people, right.
It's staggering, absolutely staggering numbers. And I suppose
it would be like having an entire state of California,
right,
that are illegally.
It's mind-boggling. As we go through this discussion, I think I'd like to add that we've seen comments on some of our other videos, or these are just hardworking people looking for opportunity, so on and forth, and they'll do the jobs we don't want to do. And pardon my French, but I call bullshit on that. It's not that Americans don't want to do those jobs; it's that Americans are not going to do it for peanuts. So yeah. But there's your economic argument behind it. And I'm pretty fond of the saying, just follow the money. So if we look at our Congress critters and who's funded their elections and keep going backwards, we have these large corporations. We have an absolutely abhorrent 2010 SCOTUS decision where the corporations were deemed to be people and money free speech. Citizens United is the judgment.
I remember it.
They can pour unmitigated amounts of money into this. So that maybe they want people here to work for peanuts, but Americans in general, I'm pretty well traveled, Jeff, probably not as much as you, but still fairly well traveled, honestly. And I don't mean this as an insult to any other country. I know of no other country where on the whole, they possess the work ethic that we do, especially if you look at people in our generation and maybe a little bit older. So it's not a case of us not wanting to work. It's a case of us not wanting to work for peanuts, but it still doesn't explain how are these people getting here? From 160 different countries and multiple people as well with known terrorist ties, multiple people who've been thrown out of the country before for criminal activity, brought back into the country, then they commit more crimes. I just saw one this morning where the guy had been deported 5 times, and he's not getting deported this time because he raped and murdered a young child. So
we have enough homegrown criminals. We don't need to be importing them.
yeah. Well, and like you said, we don't even know who many of these people are. Year to date, the last number I saw is there's somewhere around 600,000 gotaways. So these are people that we have we have nothing on them versus the people who've been funded by these NGOs. But here's a recent report. And again, I will include links to everything below. But this is essentially some documentation that was uncovered on this coordinated effort by these non-government organizations, essentially organizing this invasion. And it's the same invasion that's happening in Europe. We're not quite as far down the road as they are, thank God. Hopefully we don't end up too much further down that path. But give me your perspective on this 160 different countries, Jeff. They're not getting here on their own. It's not like they
No, absolutely not. Some of these people are incredibly poor. For them I lived in Afghanistan for a while. I worked there. And when I was there, the average income for an Afghan was $200 a year.
Wow.
You can't tell me that the Afghans that are showing up on our doorstep in Laredo or Nogales or wherever saved their money and then bought a plane ticket to somewhere to where they get to Mexico and then made their way to the United States on $200 a year. And it's obviously economic. They say they're coming here for freedom, but a lot of them are for countries that are poor, but they're not dictatorships. They're still free. One of the oxymorons that I find, all the people that are saying we need them in here to do the jobs no American wants to do. These are the same people that are telling us that because of automation and robots and artificial intelligence, we're all going to be out of work soon anyway. If we're all losing our jobs to automation, why the hell are we bringing in millions and millions of people to do jobs that are going to be eliminated by automation? That makes zero sense to me.
You're the very first person who's made that point, Jeff. Kudos. I have not thought of that myself. I have not heard anybody else raise it. That's a great point.
Because one of the reasons some people are pushing a universal basic income is they say because advancements in technology are going to put so many people out of work, you got to pay people just to be people. Otherwise, they'll starve. Basically, welfare for everyone. But at the same time, we don't have enough workers, so we have to let in the masses of humanity that we know nothing about. And I'm a pro-immigration guy. If there's an Indian PhD computer guy who wants to start a company, I'd rather he started here. But on the flip side, you got to know who you're letting in. And you got to let in people who are honest, who intend to work hard and play by the rules, which means they got visas, they applied for an immigrant visa, and they were vetted. And we said, okay, we'll let you in. But right now, we don't have that.
Right. And then there's a whole slew of questions I want to ask you, but you use the term masses, and that's interesting because for 2023, the records that are being broken as far as people illegally crossing the border, gotaways, special interest people who have ties to known criminal and terrorist organizations, the numbers are absolutely staggering. And this will fundamentally change the makeup of America. And my personal belief is, but I want to hear your thoughts as well, Jeff, is that the Democrats are trying to flood us with these invaders, for lack of a better term, and then will want to grant them mass amnesty, the ability to vote in elections, which some states are already allowing, and try to entrench themselves by doing so. But what are your thoughts on these masses, your words, of people being allowed to just walk across the border?
Well, what's frightening is where do they go next? How do they show up? You see them in New York, you see them in Chicago, and the numbers of people there that are causing those cities to basically go apoplectic are nothing compared to the people that are passing through Laredo and Brownsville and Lukeville, Arizona, and Yuma, Arizona. Where are they going? And if they're bad, how do you find them? You could let in thousands of potential terrorists or hardened criminals or gang members, and they'll move into the big cities but they're going to start moving into the little ones as well. And once they're there, what do? You know, I don't want to make a comparison to insects or vermin. Once they're in there, how do you get them out? And I can guarantee you what will happen is, even if we get a Republican president who shuts down the border, there's going to be this hue and cry of, well, we've got all these people here. They'll never be able to be productive members of our society unless we make them U.S. citizens and give them a vote.
Right.
That will be the next one.
Based on your background and specialty as far as WMDs and those sort of things are concerned, the numbers, so on the screen right now, 35,000 illegal alien convicts. These are people who've been convicted of crimes, whether it be here or abroad, that have tried to get across. We've got all these ones on terrorist watch lists. We know that terrorists have been embedded here in the United States for at least 30 plus years, Hezbollah, Hamas, and the list goes on. If these people can just walk across the border, Jeff, what are the chances that if they're aligned with these terrorist groups or they're part of these terrorist groups, that they could get WMDs of some sort? What's the actual threat as far as them perpetuating terrorist acts in the homeland?
For a determined person, it's really not that difficult. A nuclear weapon, sure. Those are hard to come by, huge infrastructure required, etc. We human beings, were using chemical weapons in World War I. Those were not very complex chemicals. There was nothing fancy about them. And what's even more frightening is the chemical recipes for those have been published for years. Anybody with anything higher than a high school chemistry background could probably make that stuff. The same goes in a lot of ways for biological weapons. Weaponizing a bug is not that particularly difficult. To make it strategic is. So you can give somebody anthrax and they'll catch anthrax and they can die. The hard part is weaponizing anthrax, where you can disperse it and take out a city, which is what you would do strategically in like a World War III scenario. And we had thought about that, and the Russians certainly had thought about that in the old Soviet days. But if you're just trying to instill terror, you don't have to kill a lot of people. You just got to scare the crap out of a lot of people. You look at how a mass shooting can shut down a city. Now, that's just one crazy guy with a gun. But imagine if you had 40 or 50 or 100 crazy guys with guns conducting 100 attacks on the same day in 100 different cities. How would that affect the American psyche?
One can only imagine.
It's shut down.
And we're back to grocery stores. Everybody JIT just in time, maximum 3 days worth of food on the shelf. If things start to break down where the supply chain isn't getting food on the shelf fast enough, I've been saying forever that we're never more than 3 missed meals away from anarchy. Imagine having the whole food supply taken out. But Jeff, I know you have some specialized knowledge here. 2 quick questions. Number one, anthrax, if memory serves me right, can be treated with virtually any antibiotic. Refresh my memory. I thought you mentioned that there's a formula for a type of anthrax that's antibiotic resistant that the Russians created many years ago. Is that the case?
Yeah, and it's not that hard to do with any bacteria. You have a bacteria colony and you apply an antibiotic. Well, antibiotics are never 100% effective. So you treat it, but then something's going to survive. And then you get the one that survived and you culture it and grow it up and you treat it with another antibiotic and the same thing. There's always going to be the survivor. Well, you just select for the survivor. And eventually you'll have one that is him or his ancestors have survived all the different various types of antibiotics. Again, it's not that complicated. People think it is. You're not going in there and manipulating their DNA. You can just do it the way we breed horses. There's a reason why an Arabian horse is faster than a farm horse, because they were selectively bred for that. You can do the same thing with bacteria, but it's actually quicker because their life cycles are so short.
So this is squarely in your wheelhouse as a subject matter expert. So
I wouldn't say expert, but I'm familiar.
Well, WMDs, bioterror weapons, those sort of things. What are the chances of terrorist cells using something like anthrax, and what would be their mechanism of delivery? Like how would they potentially, I get what you're saying, kill one, terrorize 1,000, but what are the scenarios that would potentially come into play?
Well, if anthrax infects you, there's 3 potential ways anthrax can infect you. You can do inhalation, it gets in the lungs, which is the most dangerous. You can eat it, or you can get it on your skin, and it's called cutaneous. It means you get an anthrax infection in your skin.
Okay.
The worst one is the inhalation, but to do it right, you've got to have the right particle size and the right carrier and all this stuff. It's actually fairly difficult to do. That's why when we had the anthrax attack after 9/11, they could look at the material itself and tell that whoever prepared that knew what they were doing. So it wasn't just some Joe on the street who did that.
Okay.
Other groups have tried and failed to do it. The Anshan Rikyo in Japan, for example, had grown up a bunch of, they had big anthrax culture and they were trying to spray it into the city. This is all open. There's nothing secret on this one. But they tried to blow it into the city through these giant fans.
Okay.
But the anthrax, when they grew it, it didn't form spores. So it was basically a sloppy mess. And if you had a cut on your hand, yeah, you might get infected, but then you just treat it with antibiotics and you'll be okay. The problem with anthrax is you got to know you've been exposed because it builds up in your system and you can still kill the bacteria. But when it dies, the bacterium releases an endotoxin and then the endotoxin kills you. So I always joke that you'll kill anthrax, but it may kill you back.
Interesting. You made some comments when we spoke offline with regards to the fragility of our food supply chain and the opportunity for the food supply to be poisoned in effect, whether it be something like hoof and mouth disease introduced to large herds or cattle in the upper Midwest, or to people actually injecting pathogens or other stuff into produce. Can you speak to those two things before we move on?
Yeah, sure. If you wanted to, like for cattle, if you did hoof and mouth, well, what they do is they cull herds. While it wouldn't affect necessarily the humans, you can get foot and mouth disease, but it's treatable in humans as well. But what you would do is you disrupt the food supply, and that they would be culling potentially millions of cows, and therefore there'd be no beef. We've seen it in the past when there will be a flu outbreak or chickens with influenza, and they have to basically wipe out entire farms full of thousands and thousands of chickens to stop the spread. But that affects the price and the availability of meat. If you're going to poison food itself, the Shreve Bugni, there was a cult up in the Pacific Northwest that was trying to affect an election by poisoning a food salad bar at a popular restaurant, I think with salmonella. And the idea was that a lot of people in town would get sick. They wouldn't be able to go to the polls. And then I think it was the Rajneeshis, I think people called them, that they would win the election and therefore they could determine the direction of the city government and the county government. Definitely possible. Poisoning food supply is nothing new. It's happened throughout history. But we're susceptible to it.
So
people don't grow their own food anymore. You don't have a garden that you can eat from. So you go down to the grocery store. And again, it's the same thing. You poison one, you lose trust in the food supply.
Right.
Or like you see when someone gets sick from lettuce, they pull all the lettuce. Mm-hmm. Well, if you've poisoned 20 different food types and they've got to pull all of those off the market, very destructive. And then people don't trust their food anymore.
Absolutely. Again, we're back to 3 missed meals. If you take food out of the equation, people will lose their minds. We see frequent comments, Jeff, on our videos from people who say, I don't prep. I'm not going to prep. And if the shit hits the fan, I'm just going to take whatever I want by force with gun, whatever.
The other guy's got a gun.
When we first started seeing those types of comments, we chalked it up somewhat to internet bravado, the keyboard warriors. But I think there's a lot of people telling you exactly who they are and what they would do. So pretty scary stuff. Before we move on to the next slide, I just want to draw everybody's attention to this graph here. Here's the number of encounters each year for terrorists intercepted at the border, and we're talking an order of magnitude increase since Obama started his 3rd term here. And this is a huge disaster for multiple reasons that you've already mentioned. But survival dispatch, our whole thing is to dispatch information to help people survive in these very uncertain times. And importing tens of millions of people have not necessarily the best intentions. Many of them are criminals and terrorists. It's just this is a matter of survival for our country, in our opinion, which is why we cover this stuff a fair bit. Here's another video that's really recent that shows the training that some of these people have received. And if memory serves me right, this one is the Houthis, but they basically train these people overseas, managed to get them into Mexico, put them on a train, whatever the case may be, get them to the border, and in they come. We've had a couple people on, Jeff, who said that these people coming across the border, many of them have pretty intense specialized training by terrorist organizations. Do you have any comments on that?
A lot of these terrorist organizations, if you look, especially some of the Middle Eastern ones, have been around for a long time. They've been doing what they've been doing for 50 years, and a lot of them received training from the old Soviet. There are some capable people, and it doesn't a lot to cause a lot of disruption. I mean, you look at 9/11, you had, 10, 12 guys who learned how to fly an airplane, sort of, and who were willing to die in their attack. And look at the disruption that had on the United States and the world. Now, that's just, 12 guys. Now, imagine if you've got 100. And we've got some strategic weaknesses in our systems, be it food, water, power, everything else, that I don't want to detail. I don't want to give any ideas, but I'm sure a lot of these guys have figured those out as well. And it doesn't take a lot to cause a lot of disruption, which is one of the reasons I'm against the whole electrifying of everything, because if you put all your eggs in one basket, being the power grid, and something happens to the power grid, you're pretty well hosed. I like having natural gas and gasoline and diesel and electric and everything else. So you have backups. If one of the systems fail, you've got a backup of some sort.
I had a friend many years ago who worked for FPL, Florida Power and Light. We're probably going back 20 years ago. And he supervised crews of linesmen. And he said at the time, he said, Chris, we're a first world country with a third world power grid. And I've quoted him many times on that since then, but it's pretty scary. So let's take it to the next level here, Jeff. These images here from Tucson, so pretty much in your backyard.
My town, yeah.
Of these, I call them invaders because that's really what they are, being put on commercial aircraft and sent across the country. And there's lots of pictures out there where their boarding passes have no name on it. They literally say no name. So we don't even know who many of these people are. They haven't been identified. There's no name associated with them, but we're going to put them on commercial aircraft and distribute them across the country. This seems almost trivially easy for the bad guys to get into the country, disappear, and then do whatever they're ordered to do by their masters.
Well, take it one step further. Okay, 9/11, they took over airplanes. Well, so we put in the TSA and we put in all these processes and procedures keep bad people from getting on airplanes. You had that ID, they did checks. If you're on the no-fly list, they wouldn't let you on an airplane. But now we're putting hundreds, if thousands of people on airplanes. They have no clue who they are. So what's the point of having TSA check your grandma and wand her cane if behind her are 300 people, young men of fighting age, who are about to get on the same airplane with absolutely no check whatsoever? It's just mind-boggling that we would do this as a country. It's just
specific to your career, Jeff, as an intelligence agent. We're told that whether it be the TSA, police, whatever the case may be, that they're not allowed to profile. I give you a prime example. There was somebody on the loose in our area a few nights ago. There were helicopters flying overhead. We were getting text messages and phone calls from the SO saying that there was this 5'11", 255-pound person on the run that they were looking for, but they gave absolutely zero details. So was it a male? Was it a female? Were they Caucasian, Hispanic, Black? None of that information. What I'm getting at here is, working in the intelligence field, is the CIA unwoke enough that they can actually profile stuff? If it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's a duck, or are they bound by these rules as well?
I can't speak for now. I've been out for several years now, but when I was there, nobody even thought about that. You gave a description and you gave as much information as you possibly could.
Okay.
If you were going to do traces on somebody, you knew where he went to high school and you knew his mother's maiden name. You put in everything you could possibly find on that person, because you wanted to make sure you had the right person. Otherwise, you're wasting your time. If you're looking at somebody you're going to go try and recruiting Bill Smith is going to be hard. There's a lot of Bill Smith.
Right.
So you wanted to make sure you had the right Bill Smith, or the right Abdul, or the right. But no, we didn't have any of that. I didn't care. And if the guy, not that it matters, but if we had good information, the guy was homosexual, you put information indicates the guy's homosexual.
Gotcha.
Because that's just more information that you can use to make sure you got the right person.
10/7 in Israel, horrible situation. I'm not 100% sure my information is completely up to date on this, but to my knowledge, there have been no commercial airliners taken hostage in forever and a day in Israel. And the process that's been described to me is that when people first come on the property, they're stopped, there's checkpoints, what's your name and where are you going, and that seems to trip up some of the bad guys. They react a certain way, and the guards are tuned into looking for these cues. And then the next step is they go to get their boarding pass and check in, and the ticket or the counter agent is actually trained in the same stuff to ask questions, monitor their behavior, and then of course undercover people going around doing the same thing. And it's 100% predicated on profiling. Again, if it walks like a duck,
absolutely,
like a duck, it's a duck. So again, I can't swear that my information is 100% current today, but I know for decades there were no commercial airliners taken hostage in Israel with that simple process. And that's without patting people down and x-raying them and all that sort of malarkey. It seems like we're doing ourselves a tremendous disservice by not profiling stuff. And I use my mother as an example. Now she's 79 years old, fixing to turn 80. And it's okay for the TSA to sexually assault her by touching her everywhere and patting her down. But if somebody looks like your textbook, God forbid that we give them a second look. It's astonishing stuff.
It's absolutely right. El Al Airlines hasn't had a hijacking because their security profile. And the reason they profile is profiling works. Right. If I'm looking for an IRA terrorist, I'm not going to be stopping the black guy from Nigeria. I'm going to be looking for maybe the red-haired guy who's speaking with a brogue. That conversely, if I'm looking for an Al-Qaeda terrorist, I'm not going to be looking at the 6'2" blonde girl from Norway. My first look is going to be someone who looks Middle Eastern because that's who they are. That is just common sense, but we've been so worried about offending people that we're losing rational thought in the process.
I couldn't agree more. So moving on with all these people that we've imported from around the world, many of them are not here legally. This is last night in New York City, and there were a bunch of pro-Hamas demonstrators that are funded by George Soros. If you don't believe me, do the homework. Go check for yourself. And I don't mean you, Jeff, our audience.
Yeah.
But here's an example of them burning down a Christmas tree. These are not pro-Palestinian people that are against some narrative of genocide. These are people who are in favor of Hamas. Many of them have been interviewed in these recent riots in New York City, saying that 10/7 was the best day of their life, and they love to see all these innocent people murdered and raped and dismembered and so forth. So the NYPD last night was elevated to level 3, their highest level of civil unrest. You had a bunch of cops that were injured in the process. Not only did you have these trees being set on fire, apologies for the profanity in this sign, but here's some of the pro-Hamas people hiding behind the shield of pretending to be pro-Palestinian. It's not. It's pro-Hamas across the board. The videos from last night is being shown here. Multiple altercations between these demonstrators and the cops. And this is a direct result of bringing these people in. And I'm sorry for the way this sounds, but they're not compatible with American values and beliefs. And since time immemorial, if you go back, whenever you put groups of people together who have vastly different lenses that they look at the world through, meaning different values and beliefs, you end up with initially factions and then you eventually civil war. And these people flat out are not compatible with American values and beliefs. Does that mean that we're holier than thou and they're not? I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that there's a complete lack of incompatibility here, and we're seeing it manifest itself. Heck, there's a University of Minnesota professor who went on a rant a few days ago encouraging the people who are in favor of Hamas, pro-Hamas people, to dismantle the United States. This stuff is being preached, whether it be on campuses, political campaigns, demonstrations. These people hate America, and we let them in mostly illegally. Maybe some came legitimately. This seems like a powder keg that's going to explode most likely in 2024 with all the other crazy stuff. What are your thoughts on this current situation with pro-Hamas people and them preaching death to America, burning our Christmas trees, burning our flags, all that sort of stuff?
Well, I don't think they're winning a whole lot of friends. But you look at, okay, we're a country of immigrants. There's
Right.
no way around that. If you're an American Indian, your ancestors came here from somewhere else. Actually, even if you're an American Indian, they did. But the point is that when the people came here, they wanted to become Americans. They wanted to assimilate. They bought into the American dream and the idea that they would have freedom and they could move up the economic ladder, but they'd still have the freedom of religion, whether you were Catholic or Lutheran or China, or Confucian, or whatever. Nobody really cared then. But what bothers me about the groups like the ones in New York, they're not Palestinians who want to be Americans. They're Palestinians who want to live in America but still be Palestinians. And I equate it to, how would we have felt in 1942 if all the German Americans, of which my ancestors were some, had stood up and said, "Go Hitler! We're all for the Nazis, and we support Nazi Germany." And first, they would have probably been beat up in the streets, and second, they'd have been thrown in internment camps. And those few that did, there were a lot of Germans in internment camps in the United States. They were put in prison. They were in prison because at the time of war, you've got to do that sort of thing. What happened to the Japanese Americans? A lot of that was just nonsense. They were put in there not for their actions or their words, but what they looked like, which is 100% wrong.
Agreed.
But if someone is here and they are basically preaching and marching and crying out against our country, like, my question is, why in the hell are they here? And why are we letting them stay? It used to be if you were an immigrant and you broke the law, it could be minor law. We had a case in Georgia where a girl had been born in Germany, never was adopted by an American family, but never got her citizenship. She got into a minor fight with another woman at a football game, and she was threatened with deportation because she said, "You were still German, a German citizen." She was an American resident, but she never became an American citizen. So it used to be if you broke the law, if you were an immigrant and you broke the law, they could kick your butt right out. And they did.
Either be banned for life or at a minimum 10 years is the number that rings a bell with me. Invariably, anytime we bring up this topic, people want to say, "Oh, you're racist, white supremacist," whatever the case may be. And that's just not the case. The chief revenue officer, chief marketing officer, so essentially the number 2 guy at Byrna Less Lethal Technologies, his name's Lon Pham, was brought here as a child in 1975 from Vietnam with his parents. They were refugees escaping the communists after the downfall of South Vietnam. Lon is probably one of the most hardcore American patriots I've ever met in my life. He loves this country and he would do anything to defend American values and what we stand for. This has nothing to do with skin color, has nothing to do with people's races, has nothing to do with people's religions. It's what you just said. If where you came from was so great, then why did you come here to try and change our country to where you came from? And I have the answer to that question, because many of these radical Muslims in Dearborn, Michigan, and other places make no bones about it. Their job is to outbreed Americans and get to the point where they institute Sharia law. And there's tons of evidence to that effect. Go research it yourself, not you, Jeff, but our audience. If you doubt what I'm saying. But they don't want to assimilate. They're not here to be American. They're here to take over America. They want to claim it as their own. And the fact that we want to protect America doesn't make us racist or anything of the sort. I love Lon Pham. He is an awesome guy. Every time I talk to him, we have a great conversation. I'm telling you, I would take him over any white progressive any day of the week. He appreciates, and his parents appreciate what we have here because they came from communism. They saw how destructive and how bad it is. Sorry, go ahead.
I had a friend in Florida, one of the most patriotic Americans you will ever meet in your entire life, had to flee Iran after the Shah fell because he was a Christian. He was ethnic Iranian. He was Persian. He was born there, raised there. Family had been there for thousands of years, but he was a Christian. So he and his whole family had to flee. And he, to this day, is one of the most patriotic, diehard, dyed-in-the-wool, true-blood American you will ever find. He appreciates this country. He appreciates what it did for his family. He's a millionaire. He's a very successful guy. And he came here with absolutely nothing. So these people say, oh, it's racist. It's not racist to not want someone to kill you. And if someone's trying to kill you, I don't care what color they are, you have a right to defend yourself.
Well, I believe it was Nigeria yesterday. There were some terrorist groups who attacked Christians, a bunch of Christians. Last I saw, the death toll was 140 Christians murdered by these
Boko Haram, probably.
But these people who come to America, who are fleeing those types of situations, legitimately love America. And as you can see on my screen here, we're talking tens of thousands of people crossing the border illegally every single day. Like the volume is phenomenal. The vast majority of them are fighting aged males. It's very rare to see women and children. This is like,
they're not coming across as families.
No, this is like an invading force, right? There's like an old adage, and I don't remember the correct wording for it, but it was essentially, if people come to our border, a husband and wife and children, they probably represent legit refugees who are trying to escape some sort of persecution, whatever the case may be. But when individual males, fighting age males, show up, that's not people looking for asylum. That's part of an invasion force. And this is scary stuff, because when this stuff kicks off, which is most likely going to be in 2024, we've been saying at Survival Dispatch for an extended period of time that 2024 is going to be a really rough year. And it's interesting to see on the liberal outlets like NBC, it was either yesterday or the day before, had a panel assembled, and the one lady said, I don't have anything good on my radar for 2024. I feel that there's going to be a minimum of at least one black swan event, which is something that you're not prepared for, that is a tremendous calamity. And I hate to say it, but that's precisely what we've been protecting as well. Here's another example of 2 days ago, Christmas Eve, in like the heartland in Tennessee, being accosted and harassed by Muslims because they're Christians celebrating the birth of Christ and Christmas Eve. So this is not just stuff that affects us in your state. It's not just stuff that affects us on Texas southern border. This is spreading across the country like wildfire. And this is just not the America that we grew up with. And yeah, the only thing stays the same is nothing stays the same. But the very fabric of our country is being torn apart over this stuff. And I don't trust the rhinos Republicans. I've been saying Republicans, Democrats, two different sides of the same coin. I've been saying that for 25 years. I'm a hardcore libertarian, lowercase L. You should be able to do whatever you want as long as it doesn't hurt anybody else. This hurts a lot of people in our country, what's going on here.
It does.
It's shocking to see, and it's disgusting that anybody, whether it be the Democrats, Republicans, or anybody else, is trying to benefit from this situation by embedding 15% of the country here illegally. In California, they can be cops now as illegal aliens, and they can get a driver's license and they can vote. This is destroying America.
It is. I think that's the intent.
Agreed, 100%. That's a whole super deep rabbit hole. I'm not Alex Jones level tinfoil hat, not even close. But
I'm not either.
My personal feeling is that because we're the only advanced society, or only society that has the ability to protect ourselves with firearms, the Second Amendment, that America is the firewall between globalism and freedom. So if they can manage to take America down, they will get what they want. They will get their one world government. You'll own nothing. You'll eat bugs and you'll be happy about it. The old WEF stuff. Yeah. I feel that they're making a full court press on this stuff. I think 2024 is, we don't spread a lot of FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. We typically talk, okay, here's what's going on. Here's solutions. But 2024, genuinely concerned for both the short term and long term viability of the American experiment. God forbid, but if they steal another election, that could very well be the end of this experiment.
I worry about what's going to be left for my grandkids, because it's not, again, I like immigration. You need new blood. You need new ideas, but it's got to be controlled and regulated. You got to know who you're letting in. Again, you can have a big party at your house, but you've got to be able to control the guest list. Otherwise, you have no idea who's going to show up. And then what? Then they're inside your home. Well, they're inside our home. Well, America is our house, and we have let millions of strangers in our home, and we have no idea who they are. And then we're surprised when things turn out missing.
There's countless videos out there of people interviewing somebody and asking them what their thoughts are on their city being a sanctuary city and deporting illegals versus not deporting them. And people profess that, hey, we should be helping these people. We should let them in the country. We should give them opportunity and all sort of things. And then the interviewer will say, well, here, and they bring a few people forward. These 3 guys are from Africa. They need help. So would you be willing to put them up in your house? And the person in every instance is like, hell no, I'm not putting them up in my house. So you've got low information voters voting for crazy, asinine, progressive woke policies. But when the rubber hits the road, look what's going on in New York City. The mayor, same thing in Chicago, cutting up Greg Abbott in Texas. But you guys are the ones who declared that you're a sanctuary city. But now that you have a fraction of these illegals compared to what Texas and Arizona has been dealing with, you're crying, woe is me, and we can't handle this. Well, then they like to profess their ideologies but not stand behind it, I guess.
Well, they don't want to pay for it, and they don't want to put their money where their mouth is. To people who say we should send troops to Ukraine, and I'm like, well, they'll take you as a volunteer. Go on over there, grab an AK and jump in a trench. They'll take you. And then they're like, well, no, I want you to go to Ukraine and fight.
Well, number one, I've seen a lot of people suggest that with these pro-Hamas demonstrations, that if you're so passionate over what's going on over there, why don't you go and fight the fight? Why are you trying to disrupt and destroy stuff here in America? But there were a handful of Americans who went to the Ukraine voluntarily.
I got respect for them. They put their money where their mouth is, and good on them.
They did, and pretty much every one of them ended up dead. So they were posting stuff on Reddit, of course, made it very easy to triangulate their position from cell phone towers, and the Russians promptly bombed them and killed pretty much every last one of them. So it's not as glamorous as they thought it was, I guess, but it's a lot safer for them to bitch and moan and complain here as opposed to, like you said, putting their money where their mouth is. But this disrupting is just, we don't go and disrupt their stuff, right? Like I don't know instances of Americans going and shutting down some festivity for some foreign, whether it be religion or people or otherwise, but it's okay for them to burn our Christmas trees down and harass people on Christmas Eve. It's very targeted. Very, very targeted.
I don't think it's going to do them much good in the long run because they're not winning any friends.
No, but I don't think that the goal is to do that. I think that Obama's goal all along has been to divide and conquer and pit us against each other and weaken us to the point where they end up with their one world order, their one world government, which is clearly what their goal is. We just have to not take the bait. We don't ever advocate that people go out and commit acts of violence or anything like that. I think that if you continue attacking certain segment of society, though, you can only push people so far before they'll push back, and that you could get some contentious responses in that regard. But we don't ever promote violence. But boy, howdy.
People who will swing at a cop and then claim police brutality when he basically gets them on the ground. You're going to push someone who doesn't want to be pushed, and they're going to push back. And sometimes they're going to push harder. Little guys shouldn't go up and punch big guys in the face. It usually doesn't work. No matter how big you are, there's always someone bigger.
Always somebody bigger, always somebody tougher. The best fight is the fight that you avoid. I couldn't agree more. Jeff, really appreciate your time coming on Survival Dispatch News today.
My pleasure.
Once you get your upgraded internet in place, we'll have you back on another episode. I'd like to, if it's okay with you, maybe just plant the seed to dive a little bit deeper into the fragility of our food supply and try and drive the point home how important it is to have food preps on hand to the best of your ability with your disposable income, so that if and when something like that does happen, you're not in a precarious position. All right. Well,
I agree 100%.
Happy New Year's, Jeff.
All right. Happy New Year to you too. Hope you had a Merry Christmas.
Become a Survival Dispatch Insider. We bring together survival enthusiasts and preppers to share knowledge and skills, which means you can enhance your preparedness for emergencies and ensure the safety of your community. The results you'll get: improve your emergency preparedness by learning skills and strategies from experienced preppers. Build lasting connections with like-minded individuals to share your passion for safety and readiness. Access a wealth of knowledge and resources to assist you in protecting you and your community in certain situations. Go to survivaldispatch.com to get started.